Life is not a series of random moments, nor is your pain a solitary echo lost in the void. Every trial, every silence, every unanswered prayer is but a note in the great symphony of existence, a melody composed by hands far wiser than our own. The stars do not question their course, nor does the river resist the bends that shape its journey. So too your path, though winding, is woven with intention. Perhaps you have felt the stillness, the waiting, the ache of uncertainty, but what if the silence is not absence, but preparation? What if the delay is not denial, but design? The same God who hung the galaxies in perfect balance is moving unseen, shifting tides in your favor, arranging miracles in the places you cannot yet see. And when the moment is right, when your heart and the heavens align, you will look back and realize nothing was ever wasted, nothing was ever lost. It was all leading here. There are moments in life when the world feels still, when the heavens seem silent and every prayer echoes back unanswered. You stand at the edge of expectation, waiting, hoping, wondering if God has forgotten you. You look around and nothing seems to be moving, no doors opening, no signs appearing, just stillness, just silence. What if this very stillness, the waiting that tests your heart, is not the absence of God's hand, but the evidence of it? What if your delay is not a denial, but a preparation? You see, we have been conditioned to believe that movement is the only sign of progress. That if something is happening, we should be able to see it, touch it, measure it. But the greatest miracles, the most profound shifts, often begin in the unseen. Think of the seed buried deep in the earth. The farmer does not dig it up every day to check if it is growing. He trusts the process, knowing that though he sees nothing now, something is happening beneath the surface. Roots are forming, foundations are being set. And at the right time, at the appointed season, that seed will break through the soil, strong and unshakable. So it is with your life. What looks like silence is not God's absence. It is His sacred work. It is the pause before the symphony begins, the deep breath before the dawn breaks. The stillness is where He strengthens your spirit, refines your heart, and aligns your path for what's coming. Think of Joseph, sold into slavery, cast into prison, waiting for years in what must have felt like divine silence. Did God forget him? No. In that stillness, God was preparing a man who would rise to save a nation. Think of Moses, tending sheep in the wilderness for 40 years before stepping into his destiny. Did those years mean nothing? No. They were the necessary preparation for a miracle so great that history still speaks of it today. And what about you? What if the very thing you see as a delay is actually an act of love? What if God is shielding you from something not meant for you, or positioning you for something greater than you could ask or imagine? What if this waiting season is the soil where your miracle is taking root? You may not see it yet, but heaven is moving. You may not hear it, but the divine hand is shifting things in your favor. The right people are being placed in your path. The doors that need to open are being prepared. The circumstances are aligning in ways you cannot yet comprehend. And when the moment is right, when the work is complete, you will see what was happening all along. Do not mistake stillness for stagnation. Do not mistake God's silence for His absence. When the seed is underground, it is not dead, it is growing. When the night is longest, the dawn is nearest. And when it feels as though nothing is moving, remember this: God is always working, always shifting, always moving things in your favor. Your miracle is not delayed, it is being prepared. And when it comes, you will know it was worth the wait. Sometimes life takes us down roads we never expected. We face disappointments that shake our faith, losses that leave us questioning, and struggles that seem to have no purpose. We wonder why things had to happen the way they did, why certain doors closed, why pain found its way into our lives, why the journey hasn't been as smooth as we hoped. But what if I told you that not a single part of your story is wasted? What if every detour, every hardship, every unanswered prayer was not a mistake, but a thread in a greater design? We see life in fragments, moments that feel disconnected from one another, but God sees the whole picture. He is the master weaver, threading together every joy and every sorrow, every triumph and every trial into a tapestry more beautiful than we could ever imagine. What looks like chaos to us is a masterpiece in progress. What seems like a setback is often a setup for something greater. Think of Joseph. One day he was the favored son, the dreamer with a future so bright. The next he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and later cast into prison. From the outside, his life seemed to unravel piece by piece. He could have given up, could have believed that God had abandoned him. But the hand of heaven was still at work. Every hardship, every betrayal, every dark night was leading him to the very place he was meant to be. And in God's perfect time, Joseph went from the prison to the palace, from forgotten to favored, from despair to destiny. What others meant for harm, God used for good. And the same is true for you. The disappointments you have faced, the heartbreaks you have endured, the seasons of struggle you have walked through, none of it is meaningless. You may not see it yet, but every piece of your story is being woven into something greater. That job you didn't get, that relationship that didn't last, that door that didn't open, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. It was God guiding you, even in ways you didn't understand. Think of a great artist standing before a blank canvas. With every stroke of the brush, the image begins to take shape. At first, it might not make sense. The colors may seem random, the patterns unclear, but step by step, layer by layer, the masterpiece comes to life. Your life is no different. The dark moments, the painful seasons, they are not the end of the story. They are simply strokes on the canvas, pieces of a picture that is still unfolding. If you've ever looked back on a difficult season, you know what I'm saying is true. There are moments that made no sense at the time, but looking back, you can see how God was working. You can see how He brought the right people into your life, how He closed certain doors to open better ones, how He used even the hardest times to strengthen you, to prepare you, to shape you into the person you are today. And if you're in the middle of that struggle right now, if you're standing in the middle of the storm wondering why things are happening the way they are, take heart. The weaver is still at work. The artist is still painting. The story is still unfolding. And when the time is right, you will step back and see what God was doing all along. Nothing in your life is random. Nothing is wasted. Every thread, every color, every moment has a purpose. And one day you will see it was all part of something far more beautiful than you could have ever imagined. Life moves in rhythms. The tides rise and fall. The seasons change in their appointed time. The sun never fails to set, nor does it forget to rise again. The entire universe operates on a divine schedule, one so precise that the stars themselves keep time by it. And if God is so faithful in the grand design of creation, do you not think He is just as faithful in the timing of your life? But here's where we struggle. We want things now. We live in a world that moves fast, where waiting feels like wasting. We grow anxious when things don't happen on our timeline, when the answers don't come quickly enough, when the breakthrough seems delayed. And in that waiting, we begin to doubt. We ask, God, have you forgotten me? Do you see me? Do you care? Oh, but He sees, He cares more deeply than you can comprehend. And he has not forgotten you. He is simply working according to a rhythm that is higher than our own, a timing that is perfect in ways we cannot yet understand. Think of the farmer. He plants his seed in the ground, but he does not expect a harvest the next morning. He knows there is a season of waiting, a process that must unfold. The rain must come, the roots must take hold. The unseen work must be done beneath the surface before the fruit appears. And if the farmer were to grow impatient, if he were to dig up that seed too soon, he would destroy the very thing he was waiting for. How often do we do the same? We get tired of waiting. We try to force things to happen. We take matters into our own hands instead of trusting that God is at work. But his timing is not our timing, and that is not a mistake, it is a mercy. Because if we received what we wanted too soon, before we were ready, it would not be a blessing, it would be a burden. Look at the story of Abraham. God promised him a son, a legacy as numerous as the stars. But the years passed and no child came. He and Sarah grew older and doubt crept in, so they took matters into their own hands, trying to bring about the promise in their own way, in their own time. But what they created was not the fulfillment of God's plan. It was a detour that brought more pain than blessing. And yet, despite their impatience, despite their missteps, God was still faithful. At the appointed time, his time, not theirs, Sarah bore the son that had been promised, and Abraham learned what we must all learn. The waiting is not punishment, it is preparation. It is God's way of ensuring that when the blessing comes, we are ready to receive it. Maybe you are in a waiting season right now. Maybe you've been praying, believing, holding on, but nothing seems to be changing. Let me tell you this. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. Just because the answer hasn't come yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. God is never late. He is never early. He moves in perfect time. The doors that need to open will open when they are meant to. The people you need to meet will cross your path at the right moment. The opportunities that are meant for you will not pass you by. But they will come when the season is right, not when you demand them, but when God determines they are ready. So trust him, trust the timing, trust the process, because when the time is right, nothing in this world can stop what he has set in motion for your life. Faith is a bridge. It stretches between where you are and where God is leading you, between the waiting and the miracle, between the questions and the answer. And the thing about bridges is this: you don't always see what's on the other side when you take the first step. You may not see the full path, you may not understand where it leads, but faith means stepping forward anyway. So many of us hesitate. We stand at the edge, wanting to know every detail before we move. We say, God, show me the whole plan, and then I'll trust you. But that's not how faith works. Faith moves first. Faith steps forward when the way is unclear. Faith walks when reason says wait. Faith believes when everything around says give up. Look at the children of Israel standing before the Red Sea. Behind them an army closing in. Before them a vast and impassable body of water. They saw no way forward, no possible escape. But God said, move. He told Moses to lift his staff, to stretch out his hand over the water. And it was only when they obeyed, only when they moved in faith, that the waters parted. If they had waited for the sea to split before they took a step, they would have never crossed. But faith stepped in first, and the miracle followed. And that is how it works in our lives. God is calling you forward, but he may not show you the whole picture just yet. He may not reveal how he's going to do it, when he's going to do it, or through whom he's going to do it. But he is asking, will you trust me? Will you take a step even when you don't have all the answers? Too often we let fear hold us back. We hesitate because we can't see the outcome. We worry about the what-ifs. But let me tell you something. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is moving forward in spite of it. Faith is believing that God is working even when the evidence isn't visible yet. Think of Peter on the water. He saw Jesus walking on the waves and called out, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you." And Jesus said one word, "Come." Peter didn't have a blueprint, didn't have a guarantee that he wouldn't sink. All he had was faith, and on that faith he stepped out of the boat. As long as his eyes were on Jesus, he walked on what should have drowned him. But the moment he focused on the storm, on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. And that's what happens to us. As long as we fix our eyes on God, we can walk through things that should have overwhelmed us. We can move forward even when we don't understand. But the moment we let fear take over, the moment we focus on the waves instead of the one who controls them, we begin to sink. Maybe you're standing at the edge of something right now. Maybe God is asking you to trust Him with a decision, with a season of waiting, with a step into the unknown. And maybe fear is whispering, what if you fail? What if you sink? What if you step out and nothing happens? But let me ask you, what if you step out and God meets you right where you are? What if the moment you move, the waters part? What if your obedience is the key that unlocks the miracle? Faith is the bridge. It won't always make sense. It won't always be easy. But if you take the first step, if you trust that God is already on the other side waiting for you, then you will see what countless others have seen before you. He is faithful. He always has been. He always will be. There are moments in life when we feel lost, wandering through uncertainty, wondering if we are moving in the right direction. We pray for clarity, for answers, for a sign that God is leading us. But often, all we hear is silence. We look ahead and see nothing but obstacles. We wonder if we've been forgotten. But hear me now. God has not forgotten you. He is not behind you, trying to catch up. He is ahead of you, making a way where there seems to be none. While you are worrying about tomorrow, He has already been there. He has already set things in motion, already placed the right people in your path, already prepared what you will need before you even know to ask for it. Think of the Israelites as they fled Egypt. They didn't know the way to the promised land. They had no map, no clear path ahead, but they didn't need one. God went before them. A pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, guiding them, leading them, preparing the way. Even when they couldn't see where they were going, they could trust that He was already there. And the same is true for you. You may not see the full picture yet, but that doesn't mean the way isn't being prepared. You may be facing closed doors, unexpected detours, and unanswered prayers, but that does not mean God is absent. It means He is working in ways you cannot yet see. Think about this. Long before Zacchaeus ever climbed that sycamore tree to see Jesus, that tree had been growing for years. Long before he ever realized he would need it, God had already provided it. And what about the ram in the thicket for Abraham? Before the test, before the climb up the mountain, before the altar was built, God had already set the answer in place. Abraham didn't see it at first, but when the moment came, the provision was there. How many times in your own life has God gone ahead of you? How many times have you looked back and realized that what seemed like a coincidence was actually His hand guiding you? The job that opened at just the right time, the friend who showed up when you needed encouragement, the opportunity that came out of nowhere These were not accidents. They were evidence that God was moving before you even knew where you needed to go. And if He has done it before, He will do it again. Right now, in this very moment, He is working behind the scenes of your life. He is preparing the right connections, aligning circumstances, setting up divine appointments. You don't have to chase opportunities, force doors open, or fear that you'll miss your moment. What is meant for you, what has been ordained for you, will not pass you by. But here's the key. You have to trust Him, even when you can't see the way forward. The Israelites had to follow the cloud and the fire without knowing the destination. Zacchaeus had to climb the tree before he knew he would be seen. Abraham had to walk up the mountain before he saw the ram. And you may not have all the answers yet, but you have a choice. You can trust that the God who has always gone before you is still leading you now. You can choose to believe that your path has already been prepared, that your provision is already waiting, that your breakthrough is already in motion. God is not behind you trying to fix the mess. He is ahead of you, making a way. And when the moment is right, you will see that He has been there all along. There comes a moment when everything shifts, a moment when the waiting ends, when the prayer is answered, when what seemed impossible suddenly stands before you as reality. And when that moment comes, you will realize something: you were never forgotten, never forsaken. Every tear, every long night, every step of faith was leading you to this very place. A miracle is not always the sudden parting of the sea or the instant healing of a disease. Sometimes it is the quiet unfolding of something God has been working on all along. Sometimes it is a door that opens after years of waiting, a breakthrough that comes just when you thought you couldn't hold on any longer. But when it happens, when God moves in a way that only He can, you will know. You will look back and see His fingerprints on every page of your story. You will remember the nights you prayed for what you now hold in your hands. And you will understand that nothing was wasted, not the struggle, not the silence, not even the moments when you questioned whether He was listening. Look at the story of Lazarus. When Jesus arrived at his tomb, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. His sisters had called for Jesus earlier, but He had not come in time, at least not in their time. They must have wondered why. They must have thought, if only He had come sooner. But what they did not realize was that Jesus was never late. He was moving according to a plan far greater than their understanding. And when He called Lazarus forth from the grave, when life filled that lifeless body, everyone saw the power of God in a way they never would have if the miracle had come sooner. The delay was not denial. The waiting was not neglect. It was a setup for something even greater than they had imagined. And maybe that is what God is doing in your life right now. Maybe you've been waiting, praying, believing, and you feel like nothing is happening. Maybe you feel like God has been silent, like your situation is beyond hope. But what if, instead of being ignored, you are being positioned? What if your miracle isn't being withheld, but is simply waiting for the perfect time? Because when God moves, it won't be halfway. It won't be uncertain or incomplete. When He steps in, everything will shift. The doors that once seemed bolted shut will swing wide open. The opportunities that seemed out of reach will suddenly find you. The healing, the provision, the restoration, it will come in ways you never expected, in a measure greater than you ever imagined. But here's what you must remember. The miracle is never just about you. God moves in your life so that His glory can be seen, so that others may believe. When He brings you through, it won't just be for your benefit, it will be a testimony to those around you. Just as Lazarus' resurrection caused many to believe, your breakthrough will be a light that points others to Him. So do not give up now. Do not lose heart in the waiting. You are standing on the edge of something greater than you can see. And when the moment comes, when the miracle unfolds, you will know without a doubt it was never chance, never luck. It was the hand of God moving in your favor all along.